As a step towards honoring the truth and achieving healing and reconciliation, we are opening our program with an acknowledgement that we are on the traditional territory of the Wampanoag. We practice this acknowledgement to receive and recognize and respect the Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards and owners of this land. They existed here before colonization, and they are still here. Indigenous peoples continue to experience forced removal, genocide, theft of their ancestral lands, and other atrocities connected to colonization. Our acknowledgement is one action we can take to correct the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture. It is a step towards being more equitable and inclusive on our campus. Thank you for coming out tonight, and I will now hand it over to Nancy.
Good evening. On behalf of the music department, it's my great pleasure to welcome Louise Toppin, soprano extraordinaire. You see her biography in the program. It doesn't begin to describe her capacity as a musician and as an educator. It's a great honor for us to have her on campus. Please welcome Louise Toppin.
It is an honor to be here and to work with my friend Ann Sears, who I've known for a minute, and to be here in Massachusetts. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the program and how it came to be that we chose, as you see from the front, it says the songs of Harry Burleigh, but when you look on the inside, it says centering Harry Burleigh. That's not exactly the same thing. And that shows sort of the evolution we took. We thought we both share a love of the music of Harry Burleigh. We originally thought we would do a recital of Harry Burleigh songs. But then I thought about how important it is to not only sing Harry Burleigh songs, but to let you hear who influenced Harry Burleigh and who he influenced, and how he fits in the Western music canon that we all study and celebrate. So we are, and that was interestingly supported by an article I read just yesterday from the Philadelphia Courier that was talking about how Florence Price and Julia Perry and some of the other African-American composers in the last 3 years have been rediscovered and are being played by all the major orchestras and opera houses. And he said, this music has been there. It's been good, it's been there, and it needs to stand in the canon with everything else. So you're going to hear a little bit about that very thing on this program. Harry Burleigh was born in Erie, Pennsylvania, as most of you probably know. I won't go over his full bio. We're not going to tell his full story in the program that we're given, but you're going to get snippets of his life and his story. One of the most important things about him is that he wrote several hundred art songs. How many people already knew that? There are several hundred. Good, 2 hands. Oh, they're in your class. I recognize one of those faces. And so that's significant. Think about it. 200 songs is actually a great deal. He wrote other works as well, but that's what he was known for. He grew up in Erie as a singer, baritone, and first started in church choir and then developed into a full-fledged soloist as a baritone. The time that he's living, however, African Americans did not have opportunities for an operatic career. So he went to college, he got support from his community to go to the National Conservatory. And there he encounters Anthony Dvorak, who was the head of the conservatory. With that relationship begins his journey. We'll talk to you more about it once we get to the Dvorak song that we're going to sing. But among the 200 songs that Burleigh wrote, he wrote 3 song cycles. One was called the Saracen songs, which you'll see, we're going to do 2 of them. He wrote a set called Passional to the poetry of James Weldon Johnson for tenor. And then he wrote a set of 5 songs called Lawrence Hope, the songs of Lawrence Hope. And Lawrence Hope was a pseudonym for a woman, Violet, oh my goodness, I forgot her last name. It escapes me, but it was a woman poet who had a tragic life, and he chose to set those. So it's interesting that the poetry was not always African American, but he did have some that were African American poets. The Saracen songs that we're going to sing is a set of 7 songs, and it has 3 characters, so it can be done by either one person or 2 characters. The central figure is a woman. Almona is her name, and there are 2 men, Yusuf and Ahmed, and they are both lovers of Almona. So you hear at the beginning one of the men singing, then Almona comes in and she says she hears his horses coming, and then she swoons over him, and then she has a couple more pieces, and then Yusuf comes, and then Ahmed, when he realizes he didn't win Almona, he sings his farewell. So it's a very dramatic 7-song cycle. And so I picked it because it does represent some of the best of his songs. Most of his songs were written around 1917 to 1921, with his last song being in 1935. But he also wrote songs that I call them the good songs are in that period. He did start writing as early as like 1892, is that about right? 1892, so some of the composers we're going to hear tonight actually were writing at that same time. And so I chose those 2 songs, and Down by the Sea, which is just a lovely, graceful song. So we're going to do those 3 songs for you, and then we'll tell you about Burleigh. the next group of songs that are Goethe-Lieder were by Hugo Wolf. All African American singers at this time, and all singers actually, study Schubert, don't they? That's a staple of vocal training. So Burleigh, although he couldn't become an opera singer, was very interested in German lieder. And in fact, at that time period, any respectable singer was going to learn French and German, and many of them went to Germany to study and became very proficient in German. There's a recent book by Kira Thurman, one of my colleagues at Michigan, that talks about blacks going to Germany, and that gives them respectability as they come back to the United States. It's called Singing Like German, so if you're interested in the subject, it's quite fascinating to watch what happens to black singers. So Wolf, is writing at the same time, though, as Schubert, and at the same time as Burleigh. He is a generation beyond Schubert, and what is important about Wolf, that Burleigh took from Wolf, or was influenced by Wolf, is his mastery of a poem. He takes a good poem and he sets it dramatically on just a short amount of music. If you notice in those first three songs, they didn't last very long, did they? But they had a punch in terms of the amount of the story that they were able to tell you. And so these songs by Wolf were all written in 1891, and as I said, Burleigh begins writing in about 1892, so they are contemporaries. The first song is telling a wonderful story about spring, and you have your translation on the back, so I do hope you will check those out. And then the second and the third one, although they weren't written as a companion piece, they actually tell a story. The second one, Die Bekehrte, talks about a shepherdess who is pining over this shepherd. And so she's singing mournfully about him. And then in the third one, Die Spreude, I actually usually do them in reverse because Die Spreude, she's very cocky. And she's talking about all the wonderful lovers she's had as a shepherdess. And they bring her bands to tie up her hair and they do all of this. But in the third one, which was Die Bekehrte, in reality, it tells the story of how she's mourning over one because she didn't get everything that she wanted. Wolf compresses his songs. He picks one poet and he would digest that poet. And he would set so many songs to them. So these are three of the Goethe-Lieder that aren't done all that often, but they are among my favorite Wolf songs. Okay, I hope you enjoy these three. They'll be all right, but you never know.
Das Mädchen schon noch im Süßen da war geblüht so weiß wie Schnee, Safran entfaltet, ihr Wort geglüht, Smaragd im Keim, das Sud keimt wie Blüt. Prämilch dozieren so naserweiß, schalkhafte Veilchen versteht mit Fleiß.
The next two songs that we're going to sing are actually songs my mother taught me by Dvorak, and then we will do not Notre Amour, but Chanson d'amour by Forêt. And just very quickly, when Burleigh goes to the conservatory and encounters Dvorak, the influence goes both ways. He influences Dvorak to begin to think about folk music as source material for his compositions, and conversely, Dvorak talks to Burleigh about using those slave songs that of his ancestors in compositions. Until that point, African American composers had not been setting spiritual arrangements for the solo voice. And so Burleigh is the first person that does that, and it's due to that influence and work with Dvorak. And you'll hear the song we're going to do is from the Gypsy songs, if I remember correctly. Yes, we're going to do the one that's from the Gypsy songs. The reason I picked Forêt is once Burleigh graduates, he moves to New York City, and he gets a church job he applies for a church job at St. George's Episcopal Cathedral in New York. And they have to vote on him being admitted to the choir. And so it was a very contentious vote because he was an African American. And you wouldn't think at this time in New York that there would be such an issue, but it was. And the person who cast the deciding vote that allowed him to join the choir was J.P. Morgan. Don't we all know that name? Yes, the J.P. Morgan. So that's the reason Burleigh gets the job at the church, and he stays there for, it's about 50 years, isn't it, if I remember correctly. So he has a long career at the church and brings a lot of others to the church so that he isn't responsible for the music. One of the favorite pieces that he used to sing for the congregation was Forêt's Palms. Every Easter, or I guess it was Palm Sunday, he would sing the Palms at church. So we chose to represent that portion of his life as he's coming out of school and going into his work in New York with those two. And after that, we'll do two of his spirituals. His spiritual arranging, I would have thought would come at the beginning of his career, but they actually came more toward the middle. So these songs that you've just heard were written before he starts doing some of his spiritual arrangements. And that's the latter portion of his life. He was getting requests from singers who wanted to begin to put spirituals on their concert programs. And so that's why he began writing these spiritual arrangements for himself and other professional singers to sing them. The tradition started that the spiritual will go where in a concert? Does anybody know? At the end, it would always end the programs. So intentionally, we put it in the middle as we're because they don't always have to be at the end, but they were put at the end because they're such powerful pieces. And ever since the Fifth Jubilee Singers introduced the world to spirituals, and then the concert singers began, people wanted to hear spirituals. So we're going to do those two songs and then the two spirituals.
One of the ways Dvorak has left a lasting impact on American music is a famous article he wrote in 1893 when he was teaching at the conservatory in New York. He wasn't in America terribly long, but he was here long enough to write this article saying that people who wanted to find a genuine source for an American voice and American music had two important places they should look. One was the music of Native Americans, and one was the music of African American musicians. So Burleigh came along at the perfect time, and when he sang those spirituals for Dvorak, having learned them from his family, who, by the way, in Erie were very important people in the abolitionist cause after the Underground Railroad, Burleigh brought the real thing to Dvorak. The spirituals that Harry T. Burleigh sang to Dvorak were already captivating American imagination. With the Fifth Jubilee Singer Tour that Louise mentioned in 1870, and then the publication of the Slave Songs of the United States in 1876, people began to hear these beautiful melodies and want to hear more of them. Burleigh published his arrangement of Deep River in 1917. By the end of the year, that piece was the most performed piece in recital on the stage in America. So we're so pleased to be able to bring you a couple of those spirituals tonight. that would create an extraordinarily nostalgic feeling. Following the Odyssey, we're going to do two pieces by Amy Beach, who is a member of a group of composers often called the Second Boston School. They worked in Boston toward the end of the 19th and early 20th century. Amy Beach was noteworthy because she was not allowed to go to Europe to study like the guys were. She stayed home in Boston and studied with her Leipzig-trained piano teacher, took some harmony courses privately. And when she was 18 years old, she married Dr. Beach, who was quite a bit her senior. Dr. Beach was a very well-positioned Boston doctor. He did not want his wife playing on the stage. It was not dignified at the time. And so she stayed home, studied scores, and wrote music. We might not think Dr. Beach was well advised to curtail his wife's brilliant performance career. After all, she debuted with the Boston Symphony at age 16, playing Beethoven's C minor concerto with her own cadenza. But because he made that decision, we have a whole raft of gorgeous music that she left us. These are two of her best-known pieces, and set to the poetry of Robert Browning, who was a tremendously popular poet at this time.
another way that she wrote this. She wrote it for soprano, tenor, and baritone mezzo. It's arranged. So I had to look because I didn't sing all those lines. And so I had to remember which ones were mine and which ones were the other singer's lines. The last two pieces we put on the program, He Met Her in the Meadow shows, I chose the eyes on the counter with humor to show a composer how a composer uses humor. Burleigh's entire output that I could find is serious songs, and he wanted to be taken as a serious composer. But then I found this one little weird song. And so it has a joke, I won't tell you what it is. I hope you will find it. The last song, The Grey Wolf, is one of two songs that I call a Shana. They're much longer than any of his other songs. As it turns out, it was orchestrated, and I actually had the opportunity to sing the orchestration for the first time in 75 years back in February of this year. So they're big pieces, and you can hear where he might have been an operatic composer. This is the closest thing he gets to an aria, this and Ethiopia Saluting the Colors. Burleigh continues writing, as I said, until 1935. That last song is very interestingly the only one he wrote to the text of Langston Hughes. And it's a song, a lovely, dark, and lonely one, Look Toward the Sun. So it is sending a message of I'm passing the torch from my work as the early generation Black composer to the next generation of composers. And then he passes in 1949, so it's quite a gap between his last song and when he passes. And he's finished writing spirituals at this point as well. So we would like to share these last two songs with you. And thank you for your attention. Need water before these two.
As the sun am poor now. The sable is but red with water, and a little wheaten bread. You have taken all you ever had from me. Go from your grey wolf, and let me be. The grey wolf crouches by the bolted door, waits, watching for his foot upon the floor. He waits. I hear the old hunger, the thirst for blood, rise up out of his eyeballs like a flood. What shall I do that the grey wolf may go? This time I have no store of meat to throw. I wait, but there's nothing left, and I stand helpless. His eyes fix on my head. Oh, grey wolf, will you not dare? Listen.